Adrian had not planned to stop at that small roadside cafe. He was only driving through his hometown because he needed a quiet place to think, far from meetings, deadlines, and the noise of the city. His life as a millionaire businessman looked perfect from the outside, but inside he felt tired, almost worn out. The pressure of running a large company left him feeling like he had forgotten how to breathe normally. When he saw a tiny cafe near an old gas station, something in him told him to pull over. Maybe it was the familiar landscape, or maybe he just wanted a moment to sit and let his thoughts settle. The cafe was simple, with wooden chairs that looked a little scratched and sunlight pouring through the windows. There was a warm smell of fresh bread and coffee that reminded him of the bakery his mother used to visit when he was a kid. He walked in quietly and chose a table near the corner, hoping for a calm moment before continuing his drive. A few minutes later, he heard a soft voice beside him. "Welcome. What would you like to order?" He lifted his head, ready to give a quick answer, but the moment his eyes met the waitress standing there, he froze for a second. He knew that face. He knew those eyes. They belonged to someone he had once shared long school days with, someone who used to race into the bus stop and laugh at the smallest things. It was Lina. For a moment, he wondered if he was mistaken. They had not seen each other in years, and people changed with time. But the gentle smile she gave, the way she tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, it was all the same. She had been one of the smartest students in their class, always full of ambition and hope. She used to talk about studying abroad, about making a name for herself, about changing her family's life. Seeing her here, wearing an apron and holding a notepad, confused him more than he expected. He blinked, trying to hide his surprise. "I'll just have a coffee for now," he said softly. She nodded and walked away, and Adrian sat back, feeling strange. How had she ended up here? Why was she working long hours in a small cafe instead of living the bright life she once dreamed of? He tried to push the thoughts aside, telling himself it wasn't his place to assume anything. But the question still pressed at him. When she returned with his coffee, she asked politely if he needed anything else. He hesitated, then said, "Lina, is that you?" She looked up sharply, eyes widening in surprise. "Oh, Adrian? I didn't recognize you at first." Her face lit up with a genuine smile, and for a moment, the years between them seemed to vanish. "It's been a long time," he said. "It really has," she replied. "You look different. Good different. Successful different." He laughed lightly. "Just older, I think." She smiled again and said she needed to check on another table, but she promised to come back when she had a short break. Adrian watched her move around the cafe, noticing something he hadn't before. Her smile was warm, but there was a tiredness behind it. Her steps looked careful, almost heavy, like she had been on her feet since early morning. Every time a customer called her, she rushed without hesitation. Yet he sensed a quiet pressure in her movements as he sipped his coffee. He found himself thinking about the group of friends they used to hang out with, the big dreams they once talked about during lunch breaks, the competitions they entered for fun. Back then, Lina had been the most hopeful one among them. If someone had asked who would succeed the fastest, everyone would have said her. And now here she was, working at a small cafe, her life a mystery he could not piece together. She came back after a while and sat across from him for a few minutes. Their conversation started lightly. They talked about school memories, about the old playground that had been turned into a parking lot, about teachers who used to scold them for whispering in class. She laughed at some moments, but he couldn't ignore how her eyes avoided his whenever he tried to ask about her life. "So how long have you been working here?" he asked gently. Her smile faded just a bit. "A while," she said. "It's a stable job, and the cafe is close to home." He nodded, not wanting to push further. but he could sense she was hiding something, maybe out of discomfort, maybe out of pride. He respected that, so he shifted the conversation back to lighter topics. After she left to tend to more customers, Adrian noticed something that made his chest tighten. The cafe's manager, a man in his late 50s, came out from the back and spoke to her in a tone that was too sharp for such a small mistake. She had dropped a spoon by accident while delivering an order, and the manager's voice carried enough irritation that a couple of customers glanced over. Lena lowered her head and apologized softly. She did not argue, even though the mistake was minor. She simply continued her work as if nothing had happened. But Adrian saw how her shoulders stiffened for a moment. That brief reaction told him more than words ever could. He looked around the cafe again, noticing things he had missed earlier, the worn-out shoes she was wearing, the tired look in her eyes, the way she kept checking the clock as if she had responsibilities waiting for her after work. This was not the life she had dreamed of, and he felt a strange pull inside him, a mix of sadness, guilt, and a quiet responsibility he didn't fully understand yet. He finished his coffee slowly, letting all the thoughts swirl in his mind. When he went to pay, Lena rushed to the counter before the manager could get there. "Thank you for stopping by," she said with a soft smile. "It was nice seeing you again." "It was nice seeing you too," he replied. I might come by again tomorrow." Her smile brightened a little. "I'll be here." As he walked out of the cafe, the cool evening air hit him, but it did nothing to calm the thoughts spinning through his head. He stood near his car for a moment, trying to collect himself. He had come here for a quiet moment, hoping to escape his own troubles. But now he found himself thinking about someone else's struggles instead. Adrian had always believed that every person wrote their own story. But seeing Lina today made him realize that sometimes life forced people into chapters they never asked for. He didn't know what had happened to her over the years, but he could feel that something had gone wrong, something that had slowed down or even stopped her dreams. He drove away slowly, but his mind stayed fixed on her image, her smile, her quiet strength, and the sadness she tried to hide. He tried to tell himself there was nothing he could do, that her life was her own journey. But a small voice whispered inside him that walking away now didn't feel right. As night fell, Adrian kept thinking about Lina and the way she handled everything with calmness, even when the manager scolded her unfairly. She didn't complain, didn't fight back, didn't show anger. That alone spoke volumes about the kind of person she had become. When he finally reached the guest house he was staying at, he sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the floor. He thought about the days when she used to help other students with homework, when she would stay after school to organize group projects, when she would talk about wanting to help her family lead a better life. He remembered how strong and full of hope she always seemed. Seeing her today, working so hard just to get through the day, made him realize how unpredictable life could be. One moment you are dreaming big, the next moment you are trying simply to survive. But the part that stayed with him the most was the way she still treated everyone with kindness. Even tired, even stressed, even scolded, she never let bitterness touch her words. As he lay down that night, he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't let this be the end of her story. Not the story he remembered, not the story she deserved. Tomorrow, he told himself, he would return to the cafe, not just to say hello, not just to talk, but to find out the truth behind her struggles, and maybe, just maybe, to be the person who could help her write a better chapter. The next morning, Adrian woke earlier than usual. He sat by the window of the guest house, drinking a cup of tea that had already gone cold. He kept replaying the moment he saw Lina yesterday, the small smile she tried to hold, the tiredness she couldn't hide, and the way she pretended everything was fine. Something about it stayed with him all night. He had tried to sleep, but each time he closed his eyes, Her face came back to him, and he found himself wondering what life had done to her. He wasn't sure why he felt so affected. They hadn't spoken in years. They weren't close friends back then, just two classmates who got along well and respected each other. But there was something about seeing someone with so much potential now struggling quietly. It made him feel a kind of ache he couldn't explain. After getting ready, he decided he would go back to the cafe. Not to intrude, not to pry, but to be present. Maybe she would feel comfortable enough to open up. Maybe he would understand what had happened. Whatever the reason, he felt drawn there in a way he couldn't ignore. When he drove up to the cafe again, he saw Lina inside, arranging tables and checking the menus before customers arrived. She looked tired, but she moved with careful focus, as if she wanted everything to be perfect. When she noticed him through the window, her eyes widened just slightly, and then she smiled, a genuine smile this time, one that reached her eyes. He walked in, and she approached him right away. "You're back early," she said. "I had nowhere else to be," he replied with a gentle laugh. She chuckled softly and brought him a cup of coffee without waiting for him to order. "You seemed like a morning coffee person," she said. "You remembered?" He asked. "You used to bring coffee to class every morning," she said, "even when the teacher didn't allow drinks inside. You always tried to hide it behind your notebook." He laughed, surprised she remembered something so small. Something about the way she spoke made him feel more at ease than he had in years. For a few minutes, they talked about harmless things, the weather, the cafe's early quiet hours, the way the town had barely changed over the years. But as the conversation slowed, Adrian noticed something. She kept glancing at the clock, not because she was waiting for her shift to end, but because she seemed to have another responsibility waiting for her soon. "Do you have somewhere to be after work?" he asked gently. She hesitated before answering. "Just home. My mother needs help with a few things." There it was, a small piece of the story behind her tired eyes. Before he could ask anything else, the cafe door opened and customers began walking in. Lina quickly excused herself and went back to work. Adrian sat quietly and watched her move from one table to another, always polite, always calm, but always in a hurry. He noticed that whenever the manager was nearby, Lina stood a little straighter, moved a little faster, and tried not to make even the smallest mistake. Adrian could see the pressure she was under, even if she hid it behind a gentle smile. After about an hour, the cafe grew busy, and Adrian saw the manager speaking to her again, this time about a spilled drink that wasn't even her fault. The customer had knocked it over, but the manager still spoke to her with sharpness. She simply nodded, cleaned the mess, and continued serving. Adrian felt a heaviness in his chest. He knew he couldn't interfere yet. He didn't know enough. But watching her handle everything alone made him more determined to understand her situation. When the rush finally slowed, Lina took her break and sat across from him again. She looked more tired than before, but she tried to stay cheerful. "You didn't have to sit here all morning," she said softly. "I wanted to," he replied. "It's peaceful here in the morning." She gave him a knowing look. "You're not very good at hiding things, you know." He smiled faintly. "Maybe not." She let out a slow breath, as if debating something with herself. Finally, she said, "I know you're wondering, and maybe you deserve some honesty." He didn't say anything. He didn't push. He simply waited. Lina looked down at her hands before she began speaking. "After school, I did get that scholarship," she said. "The one I always talked about. I was so happy back then. I thought everything was finally going to change for my family." Adrian nodded. He remembered how excited she had been when she first talked about it. But then, she paused, trying to steady herself. "Life happened. My father left when I was 19. My mother got sick not long after. The medical bills were too high, and I had to make a choice. I left my studies to take care of her. He felt a sting in his chest hearing that. He had grown up in comfort, never having to choose between dreams and responsibilities. By the time she got better, it was too late, Lena continued. Our savings were gone. I had to start working wherever I could. At first, I thought it was temporary, just for a few months. But months turned into years. She tried to smile, but the sadness behind it was impossible to hide. This cafe isn't bad, she said. It's just not the life I imagined. But it pays the bills, and I can take care of my mother. My younger brother is studying now, and I'm glad he gets a chance I didn't. There was no bitterness in her voice, just acceptance. That made it even harder for Adrian to hear. Why didn't you ever ask anyone for help? He asked softly. She shook her head. Everyone has their own battles. I didn't want to be a burden. Adrian stared at her for a moment. He realized how much strength she carried quietly, without seeking praise, without expecting anything in return. You're not a burden, he said. She smiled faintly, as if grateful, but still unwilling to let the idea sink in. Before they could continue the conversation, the manager called her name sharply from across the cafe. She sighed quietly and stood up. Break's over, she said. He watched her walk away, and something inside him twisted. She worked so hard, yet she barely got a moment to breathe. He could see she was carrying more than she let others know: her mother's health, her brother's future, and her own lost dreams. Adrian stayed a little longer, drinking his coffee slowly. He tried to think about what he could do, how he could help, but he didn't want to overwhelm her or make her feel small. She had too much pride to accept charity. He needed to be smart about it. He needed to understand her boundaries. Before leaving, he walked up to the counter to pay. Lena met him there and gave him a soft smile. Thank you for listening, she said quietly. Thank you for trusting me, he replied. She hesitated, then added, It was nice talking to someone who remembers who I used to be. The words hit him deeply. He realized she wasn't just tired. She felt like she had lost parts of herself along the way. As he stepped out of the cafe, the sky had turned cloudy, with a cool breeze brushing past him. He stood still for a moment, staring at the building behind him. For the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of purpose, not for business, not for money, but for another human being. He got into his car and rested his hands on the steering wheel. His mind wasn't on his company, his meetings, or his responsibilities waiting in the city. It was on Lena, on her quiet strength, on the heavy life she carried alone. He thought about how unfair life could be, how someone so kind, so hardworking, could be pushed into a corner by circumstances, and how easily people like him could forget that not everyone had the support they needed. But he also knew something else. He wasn't leaving this situation the way it was. He had seen enough to understand that she deserved better. She deserved a chance to breathe again, to dream again, to live again. And even though he hadn't told her yet, he had already made a decision. Tomorrow, he would return, and he would start finding a way to change her life carefully, respectfully, and without making her feel less than the strong, capable person she was. The next day arrived more slowly than usual for Adrian. He woke up with a kind of heaviness in his chest, the kind that appears when someone knows they need to do something important, but hasn't yet decided how to begin. He sat on the side of the bed for a while, staring at the floor and thinking about everything Lena had shared with him the previous day. Her story played again and again in his mind: the scholarship she lost, the years she gave up, her mother's illness, the responsibilities she carried alone. He wondered how many nights she had stayed up worrying, how many days she had worked through exhaustion. How many dreams she had silently set aside without telling anyone. And yet, despite all of that, she still greeted customers with kindness, still tried to laugh at small things, still held on to hope even if it was faint. Adrian couldn't shake the feeling that she had been carrying too much for too long. Maybe no one had stepped in to support her before. Maybe no one had asked how she was holding up. Or maybe she simply never allowed anyone to help. Whatever the reason, he knew he didn't want to stand by and watch her struggle any longer. By the time he left for the cafe, he had made up his mind about one thing. He would find a way to help her carefully, respectfully, and without making her feel weak. He didn't know exactly how yet, but he trusted he would figure it out. When he arrived at the cafe, he saw Lena outside wiping down one of the outdoor tables. She looked surprised to see him again, but quickly smiled. "You're here early again," she said. "I guess this place is starting to feel familiar," he replied. "Or maybe you just like the coffee," she teased lightly. "Maybe both," he said. She looked a little more relaxed today, though still tired. There were faint shadows under her eyes, the kind that only appear from long days and even longer nights. Still, she didn't complain. He followed her inside and took the same seat he had the past 2 mornings. It made him feel oddly grounded, like he was returning to something that had been missing from his life for a long time. As she brought him his usual coffee, he noticed a small bandage on her wrist. "What happened?" he asked softly. She glanced down at it as if she had forgotten it was there. "Oh, that. Just a small burn from the kitchen yesterday. Nothing serious. Does it hurt?" "Only when I move too quickly. But I'm fine." He didn't believe she was fine, not completely, but he didn't push her. Whatever she was facing, it was clear she was used to handling things alone. Customers slowly began coming in, and the cafe grew busier. Once again, Adrian watched Lena work, moving from one table to another with calmness, even though he could see she was tired. The manager hovered around, giving orders in that same sharp tone Adrian disliked. He wondered if Lena even realized how poorly she was being treated, or if she had simply accepted it as part of her life. During a quieter moment, she came back to his table. "I hope you don't get bored watching me work all morning," she said. "Not at all," he said. "I find it grounding." She raised an eyebrow with a curious smile. "Grounding? That's a new one." "I mean it," he added. "I think I forgot what real life looks like. The simple things. The things that matter." Her smile softened. She didn't say anything, but he could tell she understood. A moment later, the cafe door opened, and a younger boy walked in, a teenager with a backpack and worried eyes. Lena's expression changed immediately. She went to him quickly and placed a hand on his shoulder. "What's wrong? Why aren't you at school?" she asked. "Mom's feeling weak again," the boy replied quietly. "She said she might faint. I didn't know what to do, so I came to tell you." Lena's face tightened with worry. "Did you give her the medicine I left by her bed?" "Yes, but she still looks pale." He shifted nervously. "I didn't want to leave her alone." Lena took a slow breath, thinking. "Okay, you stay here for a moment, all right? I'll talk to the manager." She went to the back to speak with the manager, who immediately frowned and shook his head. Even from where Adrian sat, he could hear parts of the conversation. "I can't just let you leave again," the manager said. "We're short-staffed today." "It's an emergency," Lena insisted softly. "Customers are more important right now," he replied sharply. Lena lowered her head. "Please, my mother isn't well. I need to check on her." The manager sighed loudly, as if she had asked for something outrageous. "You can go for 20 minutes. Not a minute more. And don't expect me to let this become a habit." Adrian clenched his jaw. The lack of empathy in the manager's voice made his chest tighten with frustration. When Lena walked back to her brother, she tried to smile. "I'll be home soon. Just stay here for a while." Adrian watched the exchange quietly, feeling the weight of the situation. She wasn't just dealing with long work hours, she was balancing her mother's health, her brother's needs, and unfair treatment from her boss. No wonder she looked exhausted. When she returned to his table, she apologized. "I'm sorry you had to see that." "You don't need to apologize for caring about your family," he said gently. She gave him that small, tired smile again and said she needed to finish her shift before going home. After she walked away, Adrian leaned back in his chair, his thoughts swirling. It wasn't just that she was struggling. It was the way she was forced to choose between work and taking care of the people she loved. No one should have to make that choice. He stayed at the cafe until her short break arrived. This time, she sat across from him with her head slightly bowed and her hands trembling faintly. "Are you okay?" he asked. She nodded, though her voice came out softer than usual. "I just feel torn sometimes. I want to be here for my mother, but I also need this job. Without it, I don't know how we would manage." "I understand," he said. And he truly did. She hesitated before speaking again. "Sometimes I think about what life would have been like if things went differently. If my father hadn't left. If my mother stayed healthy. If I had finished my studies. Maybe everything would have turned out better. But you can't change what's already done. You can only keep going." She tried to smile. "That's what I tell myself every day. Just keep going." Those words stayed with him. Her strength wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, steady, courageous. "You deserve so much more than you've been given," he said. Not to flatter her, but because it was the truth. "Life doesn't always give what you expect," she replied softly. "But it gives you moments that help you keep moving. Like unexpected kindness, or someone who listens when you're tired." She looked at him in a way that made him realize something. She appreciated his presence more than he understood. Before her break ended, her brother came to the table. He looked anxious until Lena placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Everything will be fine," she whispered. Adrian watched them silently. The bond they shared was clear. She wasn't just his older sister. She was his protector, his guide, and probably the only steady force in his life. After her shift, she gathered her things and prepared to hurry home. Adrian walked out with her. "Can I drive you?" he asked. She hesitated, unsure. "I don't want to trouble you." "It's no trouble. And it's on my way." That last part wasn't true, but she didn't need to know. Finally, she nodded. "Okay." Her brother joined them, and the three of them headed to Adrian's car. The boy sat quietly in the back, while Lina kept glancing out the window, as if her mind were already home. When they reached their small house, Lina quickly got out and rushed inside with her brother. Adrian stayed outside, giving them space. A few minutes later, she came out again. "Thank you," she said softly. "She's resting now. She just needs some time." He nodded. "I'm glad she's okay." She looked at him for a moment, her eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and exhaustion. "I don't know why you keep coming back," she admitted, "but I'm glad you do. It makes the day feel a little lighter." He smiled gently. "Maybe I just enjoy good company." For the first time since he met her again, she laughed a real, warm laugh that carried a hint of the girl she used to be. As he walked back to his car, Adrian knew something had changed. He wasn't just a visitor in her story anymore. He had stepped into her world, seen her reality, and felt her struggles. And now, more than ever, he knew what he needed to do. He wouldn't just watch her keep going. He would help her move forward, quietly, carefully. And in a way she could accept without feeling small. The news about the Millionaire's quiet visit to the small diner spread slowly through the town. But not because anyone was trying to gossip. It was simply because people who had witnessed the moment couldn't help but talk about how unusual and heartfelt it felt. But the two people at the center of it all didn't care about the attention. They were focused on the promise they made to each other to rebuild a bond they had lost years ago, and to help each other in ways that went beyond money or status. The next morning, the waitress woke up earlier than usual. She hardly slept, but not because she was tired. Her mind kept returning to the dinner conversation and everything the millionaire had said to her. She had always believed that life didn't offer second chances so easily. But for the first time in a long time, she felt like maybe she had one. She got ready for work with a lighter heart, even humming softly as she tied her apron. When she reached the diner, she noticed something different. The owner, who was usually strict and quiet, was looking at her with a mix of curiosity and kindness. He wasn't the type to pry into anyone's personal life, but even he couldn't ignore what he had heard from the customers who stayed late the previous night. "Big day yesterday, huh?" he asked casually. She smiled shyly. "Something like that." He didn't ask anything further, but she could sense he was happy for her in his own quiet way. She started her shift like she always did, wiping tables, preparing coffee, checking supplies, but everything felt different. Even the small tasks felt less heavy. Later that afternoon, the door opened and in walked the millionaire again. He wasn't wearing a suit this time. Instead, he wore simple clothes, as if he wanted to blend into the relaxed atmosphere of the diner. She was surprised, but happy to see him. "You're back again?" she teased gently. He grinned. "I figured I owed you a breakfast. You paid for mine last night when I didn't even ask." She laughed. "That was just a cup of coffee and toast. It doesn't count as much." "I'll decide that," he replied playfully. Then his tone softened. "I also wanted to talk about what we discussed yesterday. I didn't want you to think I said it on impulse." She nodded slowly. "You mean the offer to help me start fresh?" "Yes. Everything I said, I meant it." She appreciated that he came back so quickly. It showed he wasn't just being emotional or nostalgic. He was serious about helping her. But she didn't want to jump into anything without understanding the details. "I'm grateful," she said. "Really. But I need to know what you expect from me. I don't want to feel like I owe something I can't repay." He respected her honesty. "I don't want repayment. I want to invest in someone I believe in, someone I've known since we were kids. All I expect is effort, commitment, and trust. Nothing more." It was such a simple answer, yet it held so much weight. She could feel the sincerity in his voice. She had met many people who promised things, but didn't follow through. But he wasn't like them. They talked for hours, discussing possibilities, plans, and what steps she could take in the coming weeks. He didn't rush her. He didn't pressure her. He simply guided her, giving her space to think for herself. By the time he left, she felt like a door had opened in her life, one she had always thought was locked. That night, she sat on her small balcony with a notebook in her hand. For years, she had avoided writing down her dreams because she believed they were pointless. But now, she felt encouraged to try. She listed all the things she wanted to learn: new skills, better opportunities, and a future that didn't revolve around scraping by. She wanted to be someone her younger self could be proud of. Meanwhile, the millionaire sat in his office that night, staring at the city lights outside his window. He had almost forgotten how it felt to reconnect with someone who knew him long before the world did. His life had become so full of meetings, responsibilities, business deals, and people who only cared about him because of what he had. But the waitress reminded him of a time when things were simpler. And for the first time in a long time, he felt grounded. Over the next few days, he started preparing things quietly. He contacted a few trusted advisors, discussed options for training programs, and even looked into small business grants. He wasn't trying to push her into any particular path, he just wanted to make sure she had choices. But something else slowly started happening between them. Not romance, not pressure, nothing dramatic. Just a warm, steady bond. When they talked as equals, not as someone successful and someone struggling, but as two individuals trying to shape their lives. One evening, after her shift ended, he invited her to visit a co-working space in the city. It wasn't fancy, but it was modern and filled with creative people. "I wanted you to see this," he said as they walked inside, "because I think you could do well in a place like this." She looked around, impressed. People were working on laptops, sketching designs, running small online businesses, and holding small group meetings. "Do you think I could really belong here?" she asked. "I don't think." "I know," he replied without hesitation. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel out of place in a professional environment. She didn't feel judged or small. She felt capable. They sat down at an empty desk, and he showed her basic things, simple budgeting, online tools, ways to learn new skills for free, and how to build confidence in decision-making. He wasn't lecturing her. He was teaching her like a friend. At one point, she paused and said softly, "Why are you helping me so much?" He looked at her with a calm expression. "Because someone once did the same for me. I didn't reach where I am alone. People helped me, encouraged me, believed in me. Now it's my turn to do that for someone who deserves it." It was a simple answer, but it touched her deeply. As the days passed, the people at the diner also noticed changes in her. She was more confident, more hopeful, and more energetic. Customers who had known her for years commented on how bright she seemed lately. She didn't reveal too much about what was happening, but she didn't need to. Her attitude said enough. One night, as she walked home after a long shift, she stopped under a streetlight and looked up at the sky. It felt strange to think how quickly life could shift. She had spent years believing she was stuck in the same place with no chance of change. But now things were moving, slowly but surely, and she wasn't afraid anymore. Meanwhile, the millionaire had his own challenges. His business partners questioned why he was spending time away from work. Some even hinted that helping someone from his past was a distraction. But he didn't let it bother him. For the first time in years, he felt like he was doing something meaningful. However, there was still something he needed to address, something he had avoided for a long time. A personal issue that he hadn't told her about yet. And he knew that if he didn't deal with it soon, it might affect everything he was trying to build for her. But he didn't want to burden her with it, not yet. He decided he would face it alone. At least for now. As part 4 of their story closed, both of them stood at the edge of change. She was discovering a new version of herself, one she never thought she could be. He was rediscovering what it meant to care, guide, and give without expecting anything in return. Neither of them knew what the future held, but they both felt something they hadn't felt in a long time: hope. And sometimes, hope is enough to move entire lives forward. The days that followed moved quietly but steadily. Like the soft turning of pages in a book neither of them wanted to rush through. The waitress and the millionaire continued meeting, sometimes at the diner and sometimes at the small co-working space he had shown her. Each meeting was different, but they all shared something in common: hope, patience, and the feeling that something meaningful was growing between them, even though their lives were miles apart in terms of opportunity and privilege. They found themselves connected by something simple and honest: understanding. One morning, the waitress woke up feeling nervous, not anxious in a bad way, but aware that the coming days might bring changes she had only recently started to believe she deserved. She had spent years living a routine life, expecting little and giving much, hoping for something better without ever saying it out loud. But now, with the millionaire's help and her own growing confidence, she felt like she finally had a choice. She walked to the diner with light steps, holding a small notebook filled with ideas she had written over the past week. Ideas about improving her life, learning new skills, and possibly starting something of her own. For the first time, she didn't feel embarrassed about dreaming. When she arrived at work, she noticed the diner was unusually busy. People were talking louder than usual, and the owner seemed distracted, constantly checking his phone and then glancing toward the entrance. She walked inside, curious but focused on her shift. The door chimed behind her, and the millionaire walked in. But this time, he didn't come alone. A man and a woman followed him, well-dressed, professional-looking, and carrying folders. She froze for a moment. This wasn't like the casual visits he usually made. The owner rushed over to greet them, shaking hands with the millionaire and his guests. The waitress could tell something serious was happening, but she didn't want to assume anything. She continued setting tables, trying to stay calm. Eventually, the millionaire walked over to her with a gentle smile. "Good morning," he said. "Good morning," she replied, curious. "Everything okay?" He nodded. "Actually, yes, more than okay. I wanted to talk to you after your shift, but the owner insisted I speak with him first." She glanced at the owner, who was watching them with a smile he rarely showed. "What's going on?" she asked softly. The millionaire hesitated for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "I'll explain everything once you're done. I promise." She wanted to know more, but she also trusted him. So she nodded and went back to work, though her thoughts kept circling the same question. What is he planning? Hours passed slowly. When her shift finally ended, she untied her apron, walked outside, where he waited near his car. "Ready for a little drive?" he asked. She nodded, still unsure but willing to follow. They drove out of town, passing quiet streets and open fields. After a few minutes, he pulled into a small parking lot beside a newly renovated building. It wasn't big, but it looked modern, clean, and full of potential. "What is this place?" she asked. He took a breath. "This is yours. Or at least, it can be." She stared at him with wide eyes. "Mine? What do you mean?" He gestured toward the building. "For the past few weeks, I've been working on a project. Something that could give you the start you deserve. I know you've wanted to build something of your own, even if you were afraid to admit it. So I found this space, renovated it, and prepared it for whatever direction you choose." Her lips parted slightly, shocked. "But I never asked for this." "You didn't have to," he said gently. "I saw your potential. I saw what you could become with the right support. You've spent years putting everyone else's needs ahead of your own. Now it's time you invest in yourself." Tears filled her eyes, not out of sadness, but disbelief. She had never imagined something like this could happen to her. He unlocked the door and led her inside. The space was beautiful, open, bright, and simple. It could be anything. A small cafe, a bakery, a studio, an office. Whatever she chose. "This is too much," she whispered. "It's not," he replied. "It's exactly what you deserve." She walked around the room, touching the smooth counters, feeling the polished walls, hearing her footsteps echo. Everything felt unreal. "This isn't charity," he said from behind her. "It's an investment in someone I believe in. And I'm not asking for anything in return." She turned to face him. "Why me?" He smiled, soft and sincere. "Because you're strong. Because you worked harder than anyone I know. Because you stayed kind even when life wasn't kind to you. And because you showed me what matters most in a world where I almost forgot." Her tears spilled over, as she covered her mouth with her hands, overwhelmed. He didn't move closer. He simply let her take in the moment. After a long pause, she whispered, "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything today," he replied. "Think about what you want. Take your time. I'll support whatever decision you make." They left the building quietly, driving back toward town. She looked out the window, still processing everything. Her life had changed completely, not because someone handed her success, but because someone believed she could create her own. When they reached her small apartment, she turned to him. "I want to try," she said softly. "I don't know how good I'll be, but I want to try." His face lit up with a proud smile. "That's all I hope to hear." In the following weeks, the transformation began. She registered her business, planned her services, learned new skills, and met with people who could guide her. The millionaire supported her quietly, never pushing, never overshadowing her accomplishments. He wanted her to grow on her own terms. The people at the diner were the first to notice the change. She walked in with confidence, carrying notebooks and folders, balancing her shifts with meetings and training sessions. Customers cheered her on. The owner gave her days off whenever she needed them. Months passed, and the day finally came when her new business opened its doors. The small building that once felt like a dream now held real furniture, equipment, decorations, and her hopes. The grand opening wasn't dramatic. There were no reporters, no big crowds, no flashy signs. Just friends, neighbors, and coworkers who wanted to support her. She stood near the entrance, welcoming everyone with a smile full of pride and disbelief. The millionaire arrived quietly, not drawing attention to himself. He wanted this day to be about her. When she saw him, her face softened. "You made it," she said. "Of course," he replied. They stood together, watching the little crowd explore the space. She looked at him gratefully. "I couldn't have done this without you." He shook his head. "You could have. I just helped you see it." She smiled. "Still? Thank you." He returned the smile, his voice calm. "You earned this. Every bit of it." As the day went on, she moved around greeting guests, showing them what she had built. The millionaire watched from a distance, proud but peaceful. He knew she was standing on her own now. When the sun began to set and the crowd thinned, she walked back to him. "So what now?" she asked with a gentle laugh. "Now?" He replied, "Now you build your future." "And you?" she asked. He smiled quietly. "I keep cheering for you, from anywhere life takes me." She nodded, understanding. Their friendship, their bond, their story, it didn't need labels. It didn't need promises. It was built on something stronger. Genuine care. As she locked up her new business for the night, she took a moment to breathe deeply. Letting the reality settle. Her life had changed, not because a millionaire rescued her, not because someone gave her everything, but because someone believed in her, and she chose to believe in herself. And sometimes, that is the most powerful beginning of all. With the soft glow of streetlights around her, she whispered a quiet thank you to him, to herself, and to the world for giving her a second chance. And with that, their story reached its gentle, hopeful end, one built not on miracles, but on kindness, effort, and the courage to start again.